bring up a brief background because I think it's important to all of our lives to know a little bit about where we came from. I grew up in a small coal mining town in southern Ohio. My father was a chemical engineer. My mother was very engrossed in poetry. After graduation, I joined the Navy, which upset my mother very much, but she couldn't undo it. So off I came to California, San Diego, where I went through basic training. And I was based on a troop transport out of Oakland. So this brought me to San Francisco. I got out of the Navy, went home to Jackson, and I knew that I was going to have to go to college. So I went to Miami University for 5 years because I had dropped out 1 year to work for the Atomic Energy Commission on a big construction project. Went to college, graduated from college, and came to San Francisco, 1956. And that was at the height of the Beat Generation. Herb Caen had been writing about it and made a big deal about this group of writers and poets and artists, of which there were not very many artists. And I moved into North Beach. I made my living by painting signs out there, but I also continued to work as an artist. I painted in the kitchen of my apartment, and as luck would have it with a situation, I got a one-man show at the Gumps Gallery in San Francisco. That gallery at that time was the #1 gallery in the Bay Area. They handled Bischoff, Parks, Diebenkorn, Snellgrove, and I was the young one in the group, but I did get this show. And I decided that I would do some figurative things that were carved out of balsa wood and motorized. And they were nude, but they were stylized nude. They weren't Venus de Milo nude. And we put the show up. It was all about the circus. I had this little nude figure riding bicycles. I had her in an airplane that was hanging from the ceiling. I had her doing the can-can. It was all the same figure. Well, this elderly lady that ran Gumps came in Saturday morning after the show had been installed and totally was pushed out of shape. She said, we take this show down. We can't have this at Gumps. This has nothing to do with Gumps' motto. The motto for our store is good taste costs no more. So we must take this down. So down came the show. That show came down, and I moved out of North Beach to a grocery store out in the Twin Peaks area that had been abandoned. And I don't know, it was funny, but I was bummed out about it. So I didn't paint for about 3 months, and I got so bored that I had to do something. So I was in a liquor store, and I noticed these little motors that wag the flag on Cutty Sark. They'd wag them back and forth. And I asked the store owner if he had any old signs I could buy the motors. So I got some Synchron motors, went back to my studio, and I was doing figurative work before and landscape painting, a la the San Francisco Bay Area scene, broad, drippy paintings. And I stopped that completely, and I wanted to use these motors, and where could I go to use these motors? My first sculpture was yin yang. It was like a target painting. It was sculpture because it was three-dimensional, but it was a painting because it worked only on the front. And I put this little motor in there, and the two panels slid back and forth and would stop at each cycle. And at one cycle it was a target, at the other cycle it was yin yang. At the same time, Peter Sells was the head curator of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Left New York, and I don't know why, but they were working on two major shows, the big op art show, which went on at the Modern, and the other was a Kinetic show, which Peter had selected 13 international kinetic sculptors, which were all over the world. South America had a lot of guys contributing. Italy, Paris, even Australia had a major guy in there. But there were only 13 of them. And Peter got here. He asked somebody, was there anybody doing kinetic art in San Francisco? And somebody mentioned my name. There was this guy, Fletcher Benton. He's over in Bernal Heights, works in his garage. He has these little motors. And I honestly can say to whoever watches this film, I didn't even know what kinetic art was. I had no idea there was a movement. Well, Peter called me up, said, can I come over and see what you're doing? And I didn't even know who Peter Sells was. And he was probably the most important curator in the United States. Came over, looked at my work, and put me in the show. Well, that was just unbelievable. The show did not go to the Museum of Modern Art, was shown at Berkeley, traveled around a little on the West Coast, but they did a catalog titled Directions in Kinetic Sculpture, which Peter's show was the major kinetic show ever. And having been in that show, all of a sudden, I got a call from Time magazine. They put me in a 5-color page article on the kinetic movement. I was the only American in there, and the phone was ringing off the wall. I had galleries in South America, I had galleries in Europe and Belgium mostly, and San Francisco, New York, Chicago, in the Far East. It was just unbelievable. Whatever I have done mechanically is just really sidewalk common sense. And I just did it over and over till I made it work. It was not, I didn't pre-think it out. I did one step at a time because that's all I could handle. I really don't have the knowledge to draw from a lot of different mechanical gadgetry. I made on that trihexagon pieces. Those were all made here in my studio, not this studio, but another studio, and they are all based on a motor going around and a cam arm and a cam apparatus. So I just altered it and put it together. It didn't work, cut it out in places, and just doodled around with it until I got it to work. After the graphic wall pieces, I went into these transparent colors. They were purely and optically clear, and a red would interact with the blue and you'd get a dark purple, or a yellow with the blue and you'd get green. And I motorized these in such a way that they were constantly changing. The other hang-up I had at that time is I wanted the kinetic art pieces not to look like they were done by some hobbyist in a backyard building. I wanted them to have almost the untouched look of an industrial product. And when I'm referred to in the kinetic world, that is sort of where they go, that Fletcher Benton was borrowing from industry and blah, blah, blah. But that's quite true. I use a lot of polished stainless steel, aluminum, plastics, and what have you. We cut all of the stainless steel here. We polished the stainless steel here, and we glued it on with industrial contact glue over a wooden frame. There was no welding or soldering at that time. During that 13-year period, there were some pieces that were less visual as the transparent plexiglass pieces. These works were less pictorial and more mechanical, but that period didn't last long. That period was right after the moving panels. I don't know how this happened to me, but my personality is one of order. And a lot of people don't want to see order in art. They They are more impressed by disorder, and orderly confusion is a better art word, orderly confusion. The order that I seem to have been dealing with all my life is a childish order of trying to get elements together so that they seem to be right. I can't really expound on that, but when I'm creating my sculptures and even the kinetic works, I moved things around until I felt they were in the right place. Now, if someone were to ask me what is the right place, I can't answer that. That is something that I wish I could answer before I leave this world, but I don't think there is an answer for it. There's some magic in all that I feel. So the kinetic art allowed me to make things in my garage that I didn't have to spend a lot of money on. I couldn't afford welders at that time. I couldn't afford any kind of shears, or I had a drill press and a spray cans, and a vise. That was, and some pliers and stuff. That was about it. Oh, I had a bandsaw. Well, now downstairs we got 4 welding machines, forklifts, cranes. I couldn't have managed that back in the late 50s and 60s. There's a lot of interest in kinetic art today because when I was doing it, it was all mechanical. It was all 110, it was electrical stuff. Now they're into computer chips, they're into all of the sophisticated computer stuff. So the whole aesthetic has totally changed. The kinetic art that those guys were doing when I became part of the group was all mechanical. So it was not something that I set out to do. And as I said in a little talk not too long ago, I never really decided to be an artist. I mean, it wasn't a decision I made at a point. It's just that I tried to keep myself entertained every day by doing things that made me feel good. And here I am at 80 years old, still making art, and I feel pretty good. And that pretty much is the whole story. I have no idea, in closing, what I'll be doing tomorrow.